two of the things I love about ancestral living skills. One is everything you make is a one-of-a-kind piece of functional art that is unique to you. It's not some sterile thing like, my Beats earbuds that come off the assembly line, one right after the other. Two, these technologies, they're at the height of their technology. They can't be improved upon anymore, and there's some beauty and simplicity in that, whatever skill that I'm teaching that day, has been the same for eons, whereas, the crap we buy, it's like every year, new iPhone, every year, new model vehicle. And the changes are so minuscule, get the most out of the now. So my father's mentor said, all that I am is now. That, and I encourage people out there to seek the real, get hot, get cold, get wet, go climbing through that swamp, cover yourself with leaves and lay in the forest floor staring up, for a half a day. Go sit up against a tree for a few hours. It's one of the most powerful exercises, is the sit spot. Is simply just finding a spot in nature that you can go to as often as you can and just sitting and watching. And you watch the seasons change. You watch the migrations of birds come through, and you'll begin to develop a relationship with these beings in these spaces, in places. And lastly, to just be a caretaker, no matter what. Every time you leave a place, try to make it so it's better than when you left.
All right, we made it.
Cool. Yeah.
What's your morning routine like where you live?
It depends. So usually, wake up as early as I can. I'm not a big fan of alarm clocks. We're capable of training ourselves to wake up whenever we want. If it's something super important and super early, I might, just in case. But usually I wake up, feed my pups, feed the dog, let her out, make coffee, sit down, and usually work on some writing or answering emails for a couple hours. And my days are so varied. It really depends on what class I have coming up, during the weekends. For instance, this Sunday I have my archery intensive, so I've been it's a 9-month course where they come for one Sunday a month. So I've been training them in traditional archery. So I have that class on Sunday, and it's going to be a rough one because it's also my mom's birthday, and she passed away this summer. So it's bittersweet, but she's in a better place now. She wasn't doing so good health wise for quite a few years. So just I kind of wake up and just try to figure out the best way to get what I need done on time. As someone who has currently until June, I still have my full-time job at Trackers Earth as the director of adult programming. And then I also have my two businesses, FutureNature, which is my school, and then T3Photography, which is my photography business. So between all three of those, I don't really have off time. I pretty much work from the time I wake up till bedtime. Um, and all with the single-minded focus of leading people back to nature, helping them to become their ideal selves, helping them find their vision in life or their calling.
And I really appreciate that you would take the time to speak with me, because I think a lot of my audience at this point have never met anybody like you. And if we're thinking about, I've read this book. It reminds me of this book called, I'm pretty sure you've read it too. It's Sapiens.
Yeah, yeah, that's
So there's
actually
this,
one of it's in my library section on my website, and it's a book I recommend to
yes.
pretty much all my students.
Yeah, so there's this idea of, domesticated and wild humans. And I feel like
Mhm.
me living here in San Francisco, a little bit more on the domestic side, and you and your life has been more of on the connection to the wild side, the more
Mhm.
ancestral part of our human nature. You and your father have this relationship. He passed on the knowledge that he learned to you. Was it like that growing up for you? In a sense that this was some unique set of skills that you possessed around your peers?
Um, yeah. So, I jokingly tell my students that, my childhood was pretty much like Mowgli. I was a feral wolf child. I still went to public school. But we lived up until my parents divorced. We lived in rural New Jersey, so super small, old timey schoolhouse. The first school I went to was uh, from kindergarten to third grade. There was It was a K through 12 school,
Mm,
and they had kindergarten through eighth grade in one room, and then, or no, kindergarten through seventh grade in one room, and eighth through 12th in the other. And the teacher would just kind of, bounce around to the different age ranges, and it was a really awesome way, to learn, because there you are as a kindergartner, coloring or learning how to, write your letters, and then you're hearing the teacher, teach the older kids, and you're absorbing
mm,
that. And that's the way that life skills were passed down. uh you know the Our hunter-gatherer ancestors, they learned by observation. um, they just naturally picked up the skills the same way we learn how to talk. It's not
mhm,
like you sit an infant down and start going over vowels. They just learn to talk by listening and absorbing. And
mm,
uh, then they go to school. And school is just, the Western education model is designed to turn out subservient, robots, to keep the machine wheels turning. It
mhm,
doesn't really do much to foster critical thinking, or diving really deeply into any one thing. And it's in our education system, as long as you're good at memorizing things and regurgitating information on command, you can become anything. You can become a
mm,
doctor. um, uh, that's all it really takes. Whereas the skills I teach and the way I teach, unfortunately, I do use some of the Western education style where I'm standing in front of a group of people and I'm talking. But I do it in a way to help them to learn on their own. A lot of times
Mhm.
people ask me a question and I will get them to answer the question themselves just by asking them more questions.
Wow.
Or, I'll purposely, if I'm teaching a certain skill, I'll leave a part out, or I'll I'll teach it the wrong way and let them struggle with it for a little bit to try to, you know, get them to figure it out on their own. Because we're in our society, we're taught to, think of failure is bad. When,
Mhm.
failure is our most important teacher. If we, I think it
Right.
was Eleanor Roosevelt said, if we did everything right the first time we did it, we wouldn't learn anything. So I try to impart that in the folks that I work with.
Mhm. Where do you think you learned that teaching style from? Is it with your was it with your it sounds like your education early on was pretty unique in that sense where you learned everything in that
Yeah.
one room with yeah.
So it's the teaching model that my father uses, and how he was educated by his mentor, who was a Lipan Apache elder, who
Mm,
he spent 10 years from the time he was 7 till he was 17. My father spent all his free time back in the woods. He and his best friend Rick, and Stalking Wolf was his
mhm,
mentor's name, often referred to as grandfather, as a term of respect for your elders. Grandfather was Rick's, his best friend's actual grandfather.
mm,
And he used it's called coyote teaching, where you uh, uh, design lessons to fail, so people can suss out things for themselves. And another great a great one is aspect of this is known as imminent departure. So my father said that for the whole 10 years he was learning these skills, uh, you know, Stalking Wolf would say, in a couple of weeks, I'm leaving to go back to my people, which is, northern Mexico, southern Arizona. So for 10 years, he perpetuated this thing that I'm leaving in a couple of days. So you better pay attention and learn all I'm teaching you. And if my dad ever started slacking off, one story comes to mind. My father, they were sitting around camp one day, and my father kept hearing this bird down in the
mm.
cedar swamp. And my father goes, "Grandfather, do you hear that bird?" And he said, "Yeah, I hear that bird." And he goes, I know all the birds around here. What kind of bird is that?" And he goes, "Well, what you're telling me, grandson, is you're too lazy to find out for yourself. I go back to my people now." And he literally packed his bags and disappeared for 3 weeks. And
Wow.
he would do that anytime. He thought my father and Rick were not. That we're not learning the way they should, or we're taking things for granted. Uh, so that's why I really enjoy working with small groups.
Hmm.
When I run a physical class, depending on the subject, I don't like to have any more than 10 students, because it's hard to, as a solo instructor, it's hard to give every person the time they need, especially when you're learning a new skill or how to make a tool. Uh,
Mhm.
there's all these things that need to come together to make, whether it's a fire making apparatus or a bow or a stone arrowhead. There's all these, principles and tools that you need to use, and you need to learn to use the tool the right way. Tools are meant to be an extension of our body, and allow us to do things that we can't normally do.
Mm-hmm.
And, every tool has a proper technique and form that goes along with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that if you have any more students than you can handle, people will pick up the wrong form, and then that will get like implanted in their muscle memory. And then all of a sudden, a year later, they realize they've been doing it the wrong way, and then they have
Mm-hmm.
to unlearn everything. So I am a huge stickler when it comes to proper technique and form, whether it's in the making of a tool or using a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And there are lots of other animals out there that use tools, but arguably we have the widest variety of tools
Mm-hmm.
available to us, and it's unfortunate that a lot of them we use the wrong way. Technology. We
Mm-hmm.
hear we've got computers and we've got the internet where we can access, the length and breadth of the human experience. But what do people spend their time on the internet doing? Arguing with some anonymous stranger. Uh, uh, it's using a tool the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And I often find it highly ironic that I teach people to be more connected to nature, yet I spend so much time in front of a screen. I've right now I've got my smaller monitor, and then next to it I've got a bigger monitor that I use for photo editing. I've got things like this that I use for editing photos, and all sorts of other
Yeah.
devices. um, and I think it's great when they're used properly, but
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to
when
ask you
you're
about that as
like,
well,
or,
because I'm interested in this whole community of ancestry skills, and teaching and learning it is kind of a resistance to the the way modern society is moving, and it's kind of like the
yeah,
behemoth of innovation, right? Which cannot be stopped, honestly. But this in helping people learn these skills, I mean, we're both in the education field.
hmm
It is teaching people sort of a resistance to that, especially against the ones that are a detriment to this environment.
yeah,
Um, and I'm just curious how you're able to hold those two ideas in your mind. I know you have this future nature um, endeavor that you're embarking on. Yeah, if you
hmm
could speak about that. It's just a little difficult for me sometimes to just,
yeah.
yeah, which it depends, right?
Well, I think a huge issue that we face is, our species, Homo sapiens, where depending on what scientists you talk to, anywhere from, a couple 100,000 years, say, give or take, we in our brains are still designed to live in groups of no more than 100 in a natural setting. And what's happened is our technology has far outpaced our evolution. And, you know, our brain struggles with that, and, we cram ourselves into cities, um, but people feel alone, or lonely. Um, and we call it walking the razor's edge, basically living and existing in the modern world while leading a kind of nature centric lifestyle. And a huge part of that is, um, using the tools that we have available to us in the modern age, but not falling into the trap of, the rut of what society tells us we are supposed to do. Our society tells us that, uh, you know, success is defined by how much money you have or what kind of car you drive. And, people are fed this lie from an early age, and then they spend their whole lives chasing this elusive goal, and they fall into these ruts where they literally wake up, uh, you know, coffee, get in their car, go to work, come home, watch Netflix, rinse, lather, repeat, and before they know it, their whole life has passed by them. And, they realize that the magic was in the journey,
Mm.
I've got in my 21 years of teaching, I've taught millionaires and billionaires and movie stars, and these people that our society who have reached the pinnacle, and they're some of the most miserable people out there
Mm.
because
Mm.
they're just so overburdened with they realize that they've put all this effort into amassing all of these things, but they never get to use them. I've got a
Mm.
good friend from high school who's got the two houses and the boat, and but he spends 4.5 hours a day just driving to and from work, and he
Mm.
works 8 to 10 hour days.
Wow.
And he doesn't, he's got a wife and kids, and he doesn't, he doesn't get to enjoy any of the things that he works for. And, what's the point in that?
Mm.
That's a hollow existence. And,
Yeah.
of course we need money. It's an unfortunate part of our modern society. And that was the beauty about our hunter-gatherer ancestors is, uh, there wasn't really any such thing as just property, or of course you may have your own bow or whatever, but it wasn't, referring back to the book Sapiens. I think our downfall, well, not our downfall, but our where we started slipping started with agriculture, where we were able to, instead of listening to nature and constantly on the move following the seasons or the animal herds, all of a sudden we were able to settle in an area and alter it, to the way we wanted it,
Mm.
and domesticate animals and grow food, and then property became a thing. And let's not get started on organized religion and what that's done to the world. um, yeah, and it's a sometimes it's a hard uh, line to walk,
Mm.
I hate how much time I spend in front of a screen, but
Mhm.
in order to, you know, make a living and reach as many people as possible,
Mhm.
yeah, you have to use the tools. And I
Right.
don't do the job I do for the money. My goal is to eventually, hopefully one day, be able to just teach for free, just travel around
Yeah.
and uh, you know, give this information away, because
Mhm.
it belongs to all of us. All of our
Mm.
ancestors, no matter where you come from, no matter the color of your skin, if you trace your lineage far enough back, you'll arrive
Mm.
at peoples who were
Mhm.
making everything they needed from the land around them, you know.
Mhm.
And if you go and visit with the few, kind of intact hunter-gatherer groups that are still out there, and you compare their society and ours,
Mm-hmm.
vastly different, and the
Right.
hunter, there's no, heart disease, diabetes,
Mm,
cancer, there's no suicide. The average adult in many of these places works 3 hours a day, and then they
mm,
spend the rest of their time building community.
right.
Whereas we're just constantly grinding, to try to get that money. And
Yeah. Yeah.
money only buys happiness up to a certain point. I think I forget where I heard it, but somebody said, when you can go to a restaurant anytime you want, order anything off the
Mm,
menu, that's about that amount of money is about as happy as you can get. Anything past that,
mm,
it's not going to make you any happier. So
yeah.
we have to learn to cultivate that the happiness and the peace, love, joy, and purpose we all crave within
Mm,
ourselves, because they can't be found in externals. You get
yeah.
a new thing, you get a new whatever, and you're excited about it for about 2 days, and then
And that's it.
this always happens to me. I buy a new computer, and then like 2 days later they come out with a better one, and I'm like, come on
Yeah.
now. And it's designed, the system is designed that way. If you
Mm,
look back to like our grandparents, uh, you know things were made to last. Everybody, people, my
right.
grandfather, my grandfather, um, he lived in this neighborhood in New Jersey, and they were all World War II vets, that age range, and they all knew how to fix their own houses and fix their own cars. And nowadays, nobody knows how to do any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know
Mm-hmm.
that something breaks, you call somebody, and or companies purposely design stuff to become obsolete to keep
Yeah.
us chasing that dollar, spending our money on it,
Mm-hmm.
which ultimately leads to faster and faster destruction of the earth to, create these cheap products.
Mm. And you know what? Have you ever read the book The Rational Optimist by
I
I'm
have
blanking
not
on it.
read that one. I'm
Yeah,
gonna have to write
it's
that
it's
down.
it's it's a it's a very strong contrary. I don't know if it's a contrary, but maybe you could read it also in companionship with Sapiens, in the sense
Yeah,
that it turns a very it puts a microscope to the human experience as far as
yeah,
innovation, and it was written before Sapiens, but differently from the it seems like Sapiens was kind of like an argument for the utopian vision of living this ancestral skills in an ancestral skills communities and hunter gatherer, whereas rational optimist is more of a innovation, like
yeah,
comfort, food security. It all has happened because of innovation, and because of
yep.
innovation, the environment is also. I guess I don't want to argue this because I'm not in a belief, or I'm not really that
Mm,
knowledgeable about it, but he also argues that the environment and global warming is kind of getting better, in a sense that the science and the data out there might be driven towards.
yeah.
Anyway, um, I'm
Oh,
not really. Yeah.
it's yeah, it's as far as climate change goes, if you look at the history of the Earth, the climate has shifted many, many times.
Yes.
Over, we've had ice ages, we've been hit by giant meteors,
Hmm.
um, And I do think, it is obvious the climate is changing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but, I think that, we definitely contribute to it. But I think it's also possibly, part of just another cycle. And
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean that, we shouldn't stop polluting, that should be
Yeah.
obvious. Why do we want to, shit in our backyard, as they say? Uh,
Yeah.
you know, uh, uh, so by by being conscious of those things,
Mm.
you talk about like food security. In the Western world, we talk about freedom. Yeah, freedom.
Mhm.
None of us are free.
No.
We're shackled to the gas station. We're shackled to the electric company, to the grocery store, uh, and think back to the start of the pandemic. Toilet paper.
Mhm.
And it's a prime example of a kind of a critical mass type thing. Somebody at some grocery store probably saw somebody buying a bunch of toilet paper, and then it just started this wave that like rippled across the country to where literally there were people driving around in U-Haul trucks going to
Mm.
Costco's around the country and buying all the toilet paper to then sell at like
Mm.
triple the price. And it's but imagine if if grocery stores closed for a month,
Mm.
or the power went out for a month. We have built these bubbles around ourselves. I call it the 72-degree life. We surround ourselves in this bubble of safety and security and comfort, whether it's our, we go from our house bubble to our car bubble to our work bubble. And then most people's time outside is the time going from their car
Mm.
into a building. Um, and it's people are afraid to get too cold, they're afraid to get too hot, they're afraid to get
Mm.
wet. and
Mhm.
i and I tell my students, like, look, these things are real, and if you fight it, it just makes it that much worse. I tell them, the statement I use all the time: embrace the suck. I live
Mm.
in the Pacific Northwest. It rains for 9 months of the year.
Mm.
uh, and when people show up to my classes, and that, even though I take great pains to tell them how to properly dress,
Mhm.
inevitably people show up wearing jeans and a hoodie on a 40-degree day when it's dumping rain. And I'm like, well, you can make it through this. I'm not going to let you
Mhm.
get hypothermia. Instead of fighting it, let it pass through you and learn from the experience, and don't let it happen again.
Mhm.
Dress better.
Mhm.
I wish I was like an elk or a deer, that I didn't have to wear clothes and I could just sleep wherever I wanted, and uh, poop while I walked. It'd save me so much time. Um, but we're not. Our clothing is our first line of shelter, and uh, it's just people are so uh, we woefully unprepared for if something serious were to actually happen. And I think this
Mhm.
pandemic was just a small taste of uh,
Yes.
what what's coming, because we are the
Mhm.
only animal that is able to exempt itself from the natural laws that govern every other being. you know
Mm.
we, through our technology and medicine, we've extended our lifespans. We live, there's millions of people living in areas where they shouldn't be living because they got to take water from a river thousands of miles away. And
Yeah.
you know and I don't think people realize how fragile like this machine we've built, this house of cards
Mm,
is. And um, at some point, something's going to happen.
mhm,
And my hope is that, that I hope that we can, as a species, come together, you know, stop the fighting.
mm,
You'd
mm,
think we would have learned. I'm writing an article right now for a publication about building hope, and one of the lines I put in the article is, you think after millennia we would have learned that to stop being so violent, to stop
mm.
hating each other, to stop things like racism and injustice in the world. But we just can't seem to learn those lessons. But in reality, we're all the same animal.
Mm,
We're all the same species, and we're all facing the same fate unless we start coming together. And we're purposely divided so that the powers of the world can do what they want, and amass wealth, and we're
mm.
just pieces on a chessboard.
Yeah.
And any way you can break free of that system, whether it's through things like ethically foraging for your own
Mm,
food, hunting, growing your own food,
mm.
um, every new skill you learn, every thing you learn about, fixing your car, that's one step closer you are to being truly free.
Mm,
Because otherwise, you're not free.
mm.
We, most people don't know, if you take away that safety and security and comfort, you pop that bubble, they panic,
Right.
and they usually end up dying. And this is from a wilderness survival standpoint, but they all of a sudden realize that they're lost.
Hmm.
And instead of continuing to use this logically thinking brain we have, we revert to lizard brain. And as somebody who has gone and tracked missing people, and of course, my father had built his reputation, as a tracker. We've seen things like people leaving, just dropping their backpack that is full of food,
Mhm.
clothes, and shelter because they feel like it's weighing them down. Or people
Wow.
literally were like running right off of cliffs. My father once tracked a missing hunter who was in such a panic dazed state that he walked
Mm.
across a 4-lane highway in the middle of the night and didn't
Wow.
realize it. And uh yeah, it's we're so disconnected from nature that we no longer know how to, or many people no longer
Mm,
know how to make the things they need to live. And that's what I love about what I do is,
mhm.
every time I teach a person a new skill, I'm giving them a little bit more freedom,
Yeah.
helping them, and I'm helping them to realize, what's really important,
Mhm.
taking care of each other, taking care of the earth, um, to finding ways to, cultivate that
Mhm.
inner peace, love, joy, and purpose that we all
Mhm.
crave.
Right.
Um, yeah.
I think I think that's a great point. All great points that you make, but in a sense that by helping individuals become more resilient, that that in bettering ourselves in our awareness and our connection, that we can be better people for each other, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a missed it's great to make big changes. It's great
Mm-hmm.
to be an activist, make wide range of changes, but when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to individual change, that's something that people often, especially during these times where, another big country is being invaded by a smaller country,
Yeah.
so many people are like, what can I do? What can I do? But I think the best thing, if you can't donate large amounts of money or make huge, significant changes with millions and millions of people, is to just
Yeah.
actually kind of just look at yourself, and
Exactly.
it's nothing new. But
Yeah.
I want to get back to when you mentioned about how people in the community of self-reliance and resilience, self-resilience, um, foster this kind of well, let me go back. Before I had this conversation with you, the only exposure that I've had, as we mentioned in a previous conversation, and pardon if this, mentioning of this show gives you any kind of feeling, but through shows like Alone.
Yeah.
Um, but one thing that I liked about Alone so much is that, well, what I noticed about it so much is that these people spent so much time on their own.
Yeah.
And what I noticed is that there was no substance abuse. There was nobody was on any
Yeah.
medication for any pills. Um, and so I wanted to ask you, is this something that's widely uh, like a characteristic of your community of people who are more in tune and connected
Yeah.
with nature?
For sure. So, if you take the average person, in society, many people have this they feel this void inside them, you know, and that stems from stepping back to we're taught to chase these elusive goals, to be successful, or what our society designs, designates as success. And they try to fill that void with all sorts of things, whether it's drugs or sex or newer, better things, and it may give them temporary happiness, but it wears off. But what I've consistently seen, and it's actually what my first book that I'm working on is about. What I've consistently seen in my 40 years around this and my 20 plus years teaching it is when you bring someone who is not familiar with nature into nature. And nowadays there's all sorts of studies coming out that scientifically prove that time in nature, even 5 minutes a day is good, is does tremendous health benefits. But when you connect them to that web of life and you help them to break the mentality that we have lord and dominion over everything,
Mm-hmm.
and instead get them thinking that we are just one part of a circle, this vast web. And when you teach them that, hey, this plant is dandelion, I always laugh that people who crave the perfect lawn spend thousands of dollars a year trying to eradicate plants from their yard that are far more nutritious than the crap they're buying at the grocery store. But when they spend time in nature, uh, it just kind of inherently fills that void. And
Mm-hmm.
this book I've been working on for a few years now is based on just countless uh, emails and letters I've gotten from students
Mm.
over the years who are just kind of lost souls. And then, they came for a class and it completely changed their perspective. I'll share a quick story from just, so when I started teaching in-person classes again, I think it
Mm.
was last September. Um, kind of, we did the Zoom thing for a while. I was teaching webinars over Zoom. So I was running an awareness class, and part of awareness class, I teach people how to properly move. Most people, modern humans, move the wrong way. They walk way too fast. It's damaging to their bodies. If they move that way in nature, they're an alien invader. They don't get the full experience. So I taught the class, and I teach them first. I show them how modern humans walk and what's wrong with it, and then I show them the proper way to move. And then I give them, anywhere from 20 minutes to a half hour just to go out and move through the forest this way. So I finish my lecture, send them out, and about 10 minutes later, this woman in the class, I see her like walking back towards, where the center camp was, and I could see she's crying. And I'm like, oh shit, she like hurt herself, something's happening. And she just like comes up to me and like grabs me by the shoulders. And she said, and she's like streaming tears. And she said, for the first time in 20 years, I am not in pain when I walk. And I've had so many experiences like that with my students, that once again it just proves more and more that time in nature combined with learning a little bit about the more than human world, gives people a sense of place. It heightens their awareness, because most people in our modern society are frightfully unaware. If you grab a person off the street and ask them, which direction north is, or what's this really common tree right here, they don't know. But if you go, I mentioned my friend earlier who is in indigenous studies. You go to some of these few intact groups that are left throughout the world, everybody from the youngest kid, that's old enough to walk and talk, to the oldest elder in the village, they know all the plants and animals around them, and all the plants. They know the edible uses and the medicinal uses. They know the animals and their habits and their habitats, and they look at those beings as kin, not just an animal. And to me, in my belief system, everything is alive. Rocks are alive, water is alive, and my life is no more or less important than the junco that's just landed on the railing, behind my computer monitor. Just because I can talk and use more tools than that bird doesn't make me better than it or my life inherently more valuable. It's we're all in this, we're on this spaceship, right, that's flying through the infinite darkness of the universe. We all come from the earth. We all return to the earth one day. And, when you adopt that perspective, as opposed to the, I'm a human, so I'm better than everything else.
Right.
You really start to kind of look upon the world in a completely different way. And, that's when the sparkle comes back into people's eyes. When they realize that, I don't need to go to the store and spend, X amount of dollars a month on vitamin C anymore. I can just go cut some pine needles off a pine tree and make pine needle tea, which has 5 times the vitamin C of a glass of orange juice does.
Mm.
or you teach them some edible plants and how to ethically harvest them. It saves them money. Once again,
Yeah.
going back to money, and there's a sense of accomplishment when uh, you know provide for yourself, or when you have the ability to provide for yourself.
Hmm.
That can't really be found, um, in the modern technological world.
Mm. Truly. And this whole journey never stopped until I was probably in my mid 30s when I finally walked out of the kitchen and experienced all four seasons rather than the produce that comes into the kitchen, and actually stepped outside and threw a backpack on.
Hmm.
And I got to tell you, one time I did get lost, like the person that you mentioned over in the Trinity Alps. I don't know if you've had
Oh,
any time this. Yeah.
that's some rough
And I,
country. Beautiful.
yes, very beautiful. I spent some time alone after breaking away from one of my hiking partners
Hmm.
to just hike, and I just took a compass, a bottle of water with me, and I'm a trail runner, so I like to just like run as slow as I can, but around. And
Hmm.
I got off trail, and then I got lost, and I was stuck on the side of a cliff, looking up at
Yeah.
mountains. And I just realized at that point that, you know, nature could give a damn about whether I'm alive or dead, you know?
Well,
And yeah. And after that, I was just like, okay, I need to calm down and just kind of retrace my steps. And then eventually I find my way back. But
yeah.
I know past that, I would see people on the trail and they're traveling alone. And what I notice is that, especially in myself and other people, that there's this fear. There's a fear of nature. There's a fear of going
Yeah.
out and venturing off on your own to experience these wild spaces virtually just
Yeah.
exposed without any comfort of even having somebody like a companionship.
Yeah.
Um, how do you teach people uh, to overcome that? And is that something that's common
So
with adults that you teach?
yes.
Mhm.
So, you mentioned the shows,
Mhm.
the, the shows that are out there now that, alone, naked and afraid, have caused way more harm than they have good, because alls they do is, one, perpetuate humans and nature in an adversarial relationship, right? Man
Mhm.
versus wild, naked and afraid. One thing I've learned, if you try to fight nature or bend nature to your will, you will get your ass kicked every time.
Mm.
And as you said, nature doesn't give a fuck.
Yes.
Nature is beautiful, wonderful. It can be cruel, or but it is what it is. And a lot of people, one common one I get, and this is something I ask, I teach a 1 day kind of survival basics class, and I hate that word survival, wilderness survival. But,
Mhm.
I ask, what are you afraid of in nature? And a real common one I get around here is mountain lions. Oregon has one of the densest populations of mountain lions in North America.
Mhm.
And, I tell them that, if you've spent, any more than, uh, you know, you've probably been around mountain lions hundreds of times. If you're somebody who's regularly going hiking or whatever, uh, they don't want anything to do with you.
Yeah.
They it's and they find that oftentimes the mountain lions that do attack people were somebody's pet that they
Right.
released. And, it was all cute when it was a little kitten, but then it turned into a 200-pound killing machine, and they couldn't afford to feed it, so they release it into nature, and it didn't learn how to be a mountain lion. So, uh, And it's once again, and jokingly, I tell people, I would rather be killed by a mountain lion than like slip and fall in the shower and hit my head or get hit by a bus. It's
Great
like, if it
point. Yeah.
happens, if it happens, it happens.
Mm,
And so that's why I really dislike a lot of those shows, is they just perpetuate that fear. Not only that, they also use things that are sacred to me, like nature and ancestral living skills, as another vehicle to showcase human drama. And
mm,
I've had lots of friends who have been on all of those shows. I've
mm-hmm,
turned them all down.
mm-hmm,
um,
mm-hmm,
and who they'll like, especially they'll like, I don't want to really mention any names, but
mm-hmm.
the producers will lie to one of the people. They'll say, oh, your partner says you're a lazy piece of shit, just to like stir the pot.
Mm, right.
um and shows like Alone, it's not really indicative of how a survival situation would be,
Right.
because you wouldn't be confined to this one piece of land. It's
Mm-hmm,
like, I had two friends on this last season of Alone,
mm,
and they were on this lake, and people were always complaining about how it was too windy to fish. And like in a
right.
survival situation, you would just go to a place where it wasn't windy. But because you are on a contestant, you can't leave this box. Um, and so it's not really an accurate representation.
Yeah.
Now, the loneliness part, being alone, we are inherently a social creature,
Mm,
and as somebody who has spent, you know, many, many, many days by myself, they did capture it really well in the Tom Hanks movie Castaway, where you're
mm-hmm.
talking to your tools, and um, it takes a special person to be able to like truly live alone for a long, you know, I know a few of them, and usually they're somebody who has had severe trauma.
Mm,
um, one of them I know who lives fully off grid, wears all animal skins he's tanned, cabin he built with dragging logs out of the woods with his horses.
wow.
He was in Vietnam, and he has no uh, modern stuff. He has no electricity, he doesn't have solar. He hunts and grows all his own food, and if he needs something special, he will go down to the neighbor's place and ask them to get him something from town. But he was so traumatized by what happened to him in the war that he can't really be around
Mm,
other people, and he's learned to exist with himself. But he's also got like a whole pack of dogs, which he, I see a pup, I thought I saw a dog pop in. I've got my dog, those can be friends as well.
yes.
But you can learn to also, once again, be friends with the more than human world,
Mm,
and realize that, every, uh, just as unique as every human being is, the
mm,
same is true with every other species. If I take two robins, a very common bird, you know, the average person is going to think they're identical. There's no two things in
right.
nature are completely identical, not even twins. There could be slight variations, and the same is true for any species of anything. You know,
Mm,
um, so when we learn to look at them as individuals, as part of a whole, that again, helps us to develop a deeper connection with them.
mhm,
For instance, there's this Trackers Earth has this great property that used to be an old lake that they drained when they took a dam off of a local river, and they drained it in the lake in 2007. And for like 2 years now, I've been tracking this coyote and trying to get a photograph of it. And I call him the vampire, because on his right rear paw, his two middle toenails are really long for some reason, and they
Wow.
leave like little vampire bites in every track. And it's easy to tell the difference between that coyote's tracks and another one's, even to an untrained eye. And so, when we work on heightening our skills of awareness, we start to see these differences. We start to
Mhm.
pay attention to how the ebb and flow of what's going on around us. We learn to listen to nature. If you learn to listen, right, you can tell when a storm is coming by listening and watching what the animals are doing. If you think back, was it 20 years ago now almost, to the tsunami that killed all those people? Uh, people, before the earthquake even happened, people noticed that the animals were all moving inland.
Mm.
Um, and then all of a sudden the ocean disappears as the tsunami builds, and what did the people on vacation do? They're like, oh, let's go check that out. In that island chain, there is a group of indigenous peoples. They
Mhm.
didn't lose one person because they felt that something was coming.
Mm.
They paid
Mm.
attention to what the animals are doing, and they learn to listen with something other than their ears and see with something other than our eyes. We can tap into that. It's almost akin to like natural internet. We'll call it that. And it's just like, I if I'm out in the woods with my camera, we have Stellar's jays here, and you guys have them there.
Mhm.
Uh, they're one of the great alarm systems of the woods. And when I hear Stellar's Jay alarm calls, I can tell whether they're alarm calling about an owl or a bobcat. They have a different type of alarm they do. Um, and yeah, and as I said, the more you learn about this stuff, the more it fills you up and just
Mm.
makes you realize how wonderful and amazing this world is.
Wow.
And the negative side of heightened awareness is it makes the destruction that much more apparent. It makes the
Mm.
pollution that much more apparent. And so my goal as of late has been this idea of taking people and turning them from takers into caretakers.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, you know, it's funny how, we're the most, arguably the most advanced animal out there, but, we don't seem to know what our purpose is. What's the
Right.
meaning of life? You know, and if you look at the animal world, they just automatically fulfill their purpose. Bees
Mhm.
pollinate flowers. Things like vultures eat carrion and dead things in order to prevent the spread of disease.
Mhm.
All these things serve a purpose, and they're all interconnected. But we don't seem to know what to do with our time, with ourselves.
Mhm.
And I truly believe that we're meant to be caretakers, in the
Mhm.
sense of that every time I, go into a space or a place, I look at it through, what I call the eye of the tracker, and take all this information in and
Mhm.
try to determine what I can do to make that place or that space better uh, when I when I leave, or after I leave it.
Right.
So, It could be something simple as picking up trash that you see in the woods or on the street, or spending some time with a friend who's struggling and going through something, and taking a little bit of extra time out of your day to
Right.
be a good friend. And the more we kind of do these selfless acts, uh, people around will notice them, and they will emulate that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I once my little brother, my half brother, we were at a um, an event at a local park back. This is back when I worked in with my dad in New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
and it was one of those like summer events. There was some bands playing, and it was really windy that day, and there was just like trash being blown around everywhere. And my little brother Cody, who is probably 3 at the time, jumps down, um, and starts picking up trash. And then all of a sudden, you could watch it ripple through the crowd. And before you know
Oh,
it,
wow.
everybody was picking up trash. So by doing things like that, people see that, and, they will emulate it. And, that's how I try to change the world, is one person at a time. Because if you try to change things on a mass scale, like you said before, it seems impossible. It seems
Mm-hmm.
daunting.
Mm.
But I adopt the philosophy my dad does, which is all I have to do is just get one more person to
Right.
change the way they live their life upon this earth. And if that one more person is going to cause that critical mass flip to where
Mm.
we all globally change the way we look upon things.
Mm-hmm.
Because stepping back to like tools, if you look at the histories of the tools our hunter-gatherer ancestors used, in many instances, the technology, we'll call it, was developed at the same time, but yet on opposite sides of the human world. Now, it wasn't like, some, Neanderthal figured out a new way to break a rock and like send an email to his buddy, right?
Yeah.
It was just kind
Mm-hmm.
of put out there on that
Mm-hmm.
natural internet, as I call it. There's been studies done with, certain species of monkeys on
Right.
different islands. And one group of a particular monkey will start doing something some way. And then all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden, throughout this whole chain of islands, it'll eventually, they'll all start doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not like somebody, they're emailing each other. They just, it's, once an idea is out there,
Right.
on the ethers,
Yeah.
we can pick it up if we learn to listen.
Yeah. Yeah. I read something about that, and I think it's in the book that I mentioned to you earlier, is that
Yeah, I gotta get
although
that book.
we attach ideas to names, but yet these ideas are not unique to any one person. It somebody
Yep.
would have eventually invented it, had it
Well,
not
it's
been
like
that one person. Yeah.
it's like the 10,000 monkeys theory, where if you, or no, where if you put like an infinite amount of monkeys in a room with a typewriter, eventually they'll like write a
Yeah.
Shakespeare, you know. It's,
Right. Right.
yeah,
But
that's
yeah, going. I
good.
I guess this is kind of like switching topics, but going back to um, what your it seems like your message of in teaching everybody is to develop kind of an awareness and deepen their observation with the things that are around them. And
Yeah.
one thing that I love about in researching this conversation is what you said was that there's a baseline to everything,
Yep.
and blending in is more uh, detrimental to your survival than actually like making noise and um,
Yeah.
like get me out of here or something like that, right? Um,
Yeah.
but in that concept of baseline, is there anything that you can think of where disruption is necessary in any survival situation, or not
Um,
survival situation, but in any living situation?
Let me think. Disruption. You mean like violating the baseline and like making your
Yes, sir.
uh
Yep.
yeah. I if you look back to hunter gatherer all over the world, there were times and places where whole herds of mammoths were purposely funneled off of cliffs. And there was actually one I read about recently where I can't think if it was mammoths or it was elk, but they ran, or bison. It may have been bison, but they basically ran so many bison off this cliff, and quickly harvested as much of the meat as they could. But the pile that was left over actually started a wildfire from all of the like decaying animal flesh.
Wow.
Um, and Yeah, it's um, and another book I recommend people read is 1491, and
Mhm.
it's basically about the indigenous peoples of North and South America, pre any European contact.
Mhm.
And you know a lot of the indigenous cultures did alter the landscape, everything
Mhm.
from controlled burns to which opens up, burns out all the snags and lets more sunlight in to allow more plant growth, which allows herbivore populations to increase. Um, it's not like they were all. Humans have always sought to alter the environment, or not always, but you know altered the environment to make things a little bit more ideal, whether it's to make for better hunting, or make for there. For instance, there's a plant called camas. That there are still patches of camas in Washington State that the indigenous peoples have been harvesting from for millennia, and they still do it, and they still go and maintain these patches. Um, you know, and it's so yeah. There are times when it might benefit to kind of break that baseline.
Mhm.
Um, the only thing I would the only context I would use it in, or would be when hunting in a group. You
Mhm.
get you set up some hunters down here, and then you have other people over here start making noise to flush the animals towards the people with the bows or with the spears. um, but it's an effective hunting technique. And but yeah, things like wolves, packs of wolves, they do um, group hunting, disrupting the baseline. It's really it's one thing I've learned in my study of all this stuff is that the more you learn, the less you realize you know
Right.
and it's that you often hear the term master thrown around a lot. Oh, this person's a master of this, or this person's a master of that. Somebody who's a master will be the first to tell you that, as I said, the more you learn about something, the less you realize you actually know about it.
Hmm.
I just finally yesterday got Starlink. So
Yeah.
speaking of technology, one of the things about living rurally is internet sucks and it's
Mm-hmm.
expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And we finally, after 6 months, 8 months of waiting, got our Starlink set up and the internet. Like, I actually have real internet now. Um, and I'm just, even though it's ruined star photography for a lot of people, um, inherently, I think it's a good thing because
Mm.
it allows people in rural areas to
Mm-hmm.
have the same access to the same information as everybody else.
Mm.
And, um, cost wise, it's the amount, you pay for the dish and the router.
Right.
And it took me, it took me literally 10 minutes to set up. I walked out with my phone and it has you like scan the sky and it says right here's a good spot. You put the dish there, um, plug it in inside, and within 15 minutes I
Right.
had internet that is 10 times faster, like literally, than what we were using, and it's uh, 4 times cheaper per month
Wow. Wow.
than what we were paying for regular satellite internet, which is horrible. And
Yeah.
as somebody who's a photographer, which is another passion of mine, uh, if I have to send somebody previous to yesterday, uh,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't email a video that was more than a minute. I would have to literally go with my hard drive to the city or to a coffee shop and get it out that way.
Wow.
So, having the ability now, to not have those constraints. I uploaded a video like 3 days ago to my students of a particular class, and it was a 40-minute video that was in 360p quality, and it took like 14 hours. And
Well,
then
yeah.
last
Yeah.
night, I uploaded a video that was that I took with my drone that was 2.7K, and it uploaded in like 5 minutes, whereas
Wow.
before it would probably take a month. So it's
Yeah. A month. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So with that said, with Starlink, I'm just trying to get a sense of what your what your living situation is and your connection to the modern world from where you are.
Yeah. Yeah, so I live in a decently sized cabin uh,
Mm.
with my partner Lisa. We live outside. We live an hour east of Portland, right by Mount Hood.
Mm-hmm.
So Portland's close. The nearest town where you can go get grocery store is about 20 minutes away. I live on top of a ridge line that overlooks. My backyard is essentially Mount Hood National Forest, which is hundreds of thousands of acres. Um, and it's really beautiful. But what is scary. I often joke that I traded hurricanes on the East Coast to move out here for earthquakes, and Mount Hood, which is 20 minutes away, is still an active volcano, and what the wildfires. The first year we were here was the whole summer. It was just smoke, like
Mm.
so thick you couldn't see. 2 years ago, we were without power for 2 weeks. And the air quality was like 700 because of wildfires, started by
Mm-hmm.
some idiot flicking a cigarette butt out the window.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big
Mm-hmm.
fan of the punitive justice system, but if we're in the middle of wildfire season and I see somebody flick a cigarette butt out the window, I will call the sheriff on them and report them, because
Right.
there's only one way out of where I live. You can
Yeah.
either turn left out of my driveway or right, and both, it's woods on both sides.
Right.
So
Right.
in theory, we could technically get trapped up here, but once again, nature doesn't give a fuck. And
Yeah. Yeah. Does
but
not nurture.
yeah, I mean, starting soon, we get our go stuff together, where if we ever got to go in
Okay.
quickness, we've got a couple totes of stuff
Yeah.
that we can throw in the vehicle and get out of there, important papers and things like that.
Mhm. How
um
much of your food do you forage and hunt for yourself
um
and your partner?
so I've kind of, I haven't done any hunting since moving to Oregon for a few reasons. One is, um, between my friend group, I've got friends that raise everything from sheeps to ducks, so I have access to meat, through that way, and um, we also have friends that our farm and
Mhm.
get most of our vegetables that way. But yeah, I still do. I still do some, some foraging.
Mhm.
Um, but as far as the hunting goes, I kind of, uh, I'm not gonna say I lost a taste for it. That's not the right word.
Mhm.
But I would much rather now go out and hunt with my camera.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
because I've one thing, when you look upon the world the way I do, modern people like to put a hierarchy on life, right? A horse is better than a cow. A
Yes.
dog is better than a coyote. It's like, when, as I said earlier, my life is no less, more or less important than any other life. So that's why I always, I think factory farming is horrible, both for meat and vegetables. But I've gotten in arguments with people who are don't eat meat for moral reasons, and I'm
Mm.
like, do you realize how many animals get killed in the farming of the food that you eat?
Mhm.
It's
Right.
and just because you can't hear the plants scream when you pull them from the ground doesn't mean that they don't. Which is another kind of blessing and curse of being a more aware person.
Right.
So you learn to, one thing, going back to the show, the survival shows,
Mhm.
another thing that they've caused is people to start opening schools who don't have the experience to
Mhm.
charge money to teach, and they're literally killing their students. I tell my students, whether it's a single day basics class or my 9 month long intensive, I want you to share these skills with the
Mhm.
people in your life, but don't go open a school and start charging money for them until you have actually gone out and put them into practice.
Mhm.
Um, that's because there's only so much you can learn by uh, practicing a skill on your back deck, or
Mhm.
watching a few YouTube videos.
Mhm.
And when my father started his school in 1978, there was only one other school in the country that taught something similar, but it was more like mountaineering and that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
When before, less, the only of show that I have any respect for, it's not on anymore, was the original Les Stroud's original show, Survivor
Mm,
Man,
yeah. Mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm.
he was actually going out and filming himself.
Yes.
Whereas, another very popular individual whose name I won't bring up, it was actually one of my students who ratted him out that he was going back to like a 5-star resort at night and had a whole crew of people helping him build things, uh, and so it's spawned, it's turned what I do into an industry. Now, in 2009, when I stopped working with my dad, I actually Discovery Channel, or called me and asked me, to replace said individual on
Mm-hmm.
what was the most popular show at the time, and I laughed and hung up on them, even though they offered me a very large amount of money. Um, so now there's uh, in this country alone probably hundreds of schools
Right.
being run by underqualified people, which makes it that much harder for those of us that actually know what we're doing
Mm-hmm.
to to make a living, and it's going back to the survival. I don't like I I'm in the middle, so I know nothing about like SEO, search engine optimization, and Instagram keyword. So I actually hired people to teach me about SEO for my website, and I have an Instagram consultant.
Wow.
And that they keep like pushing. You got to use the wilderness survival because it's so popular,
Mm.
and I really dislike the word survival because uh, for a couple of reasons. Once again, you hear the word survival and most people's immediate thought is that humans in nature, you know,
Yep.
you bumping it, fighting nature,
Conquering.
or
Mm.
or worse yet, it alludes to the fact that our ancestors were in a constant struggle for survival, when nothing could be further from the truth.
Mm-hmm.
A survival situation is when, to me, is when, all of a sudden, for whatever reason, you find yourself, without shelter, water, or fire. That's why my master class that I did is about the first 72 hours of a survival situation,
Mm.
because one of three things is going to happen in that 72 hours. You're going to get rescued, you'll die from exposure, either hypo or hyperthermia, or you'll die from dehydration.
Mm.
A lot of people think food, anytime you successfully recover somebody who's been lost in the woods, you do an
Right.
exit interview with them, and you ask them, when you realized you were lost and you weren't going to make it home that night, what's the first thing you thought of? And unanimously, people say food. I thought about food. Right? We can go a month without eating. You know,
Yes.
2 3 weeks, no problem. With very little adverse effects. Whereas water, we are chronically dehydrated as a society, and I think that leads to a lot of our
Mm.
our Western ailments. Um, lack of water and lack of shelter is going to kill you way quicker than not eating,
Right.
uh, not eating well. So yeah, yeah. So I always tell people the easiest way to make it through a survival situation is not to end up in one in the first place. And we do
Yeah.
that by being more aware, by constantly knowing, when you're in nature, where you are in time and space. And you do that by paying attention, by, you know, if you watch most people walk, they walk, if they're not looking at their cell phone, they're walking and they're always looking at the ground in front of them, because they are this ties back to movement, which my second book is going to be about. They basically, a modern human throws their upper body forward, and in a blind panic, the bottom half tries to catch up with the top half. And when we walk this way, we take these really long strides and hit with those heavy heel toe footfalls. So our subconscious mind says, oh shit, you're committing all of your weight to what you're stepping on before you know what you're stepping on. So to protect the body, I'm always going to look at the ground in front of me. But when you learn to allow your feet to talk to the ground for you, slow down a little bit, all of a sudden you can look up and look around, and you'll notice unique things that will help you figure out where you are. Up here, the most people get lost during mushroom season and berry picking season, because they're like focused on these things on the ground. And a lot of main trails are so well used that they're recessed, so you can be 10-20 feet off of it and not see it. And all of a sudden they realize that, oh shit, I don't know where I am. And
Right.
most of the time they panic. A book I'll highly recommend to you and listeners is a book called Deep Survival by
I
Lawrence
have read that.
Gonzalez.
I love
Yeah.
that book.
And and it's we've all heard the term survival of the fittest, right? That's for evolution. Making it through a survival situation has nothing to do with how physically strong you are. It's about maintaining a positive mental attitude, and having a little bit of knowledge. And it's yeah, because the moment you mentally give up, you're done for. And
Right.
our physical mind is our greatest ally and our worst enemy. There have been people who have been accidentally, doctor mixes up the charts, and guy goes in for a checkup and gets told he has stage 4 cancer and he's got 2 months to live, and he dies, only to find out that the doctor was reading the wrong chart. So that person, as soon as they heard that, they just instantly mentally gave up and convinced themselves that they were dying of cancer. The same opposite is true. There have been people who've had stage 4 cancer and not been told, who had a 2-month to live diagnosis and lived for 10 more years. So we are what we think. The mental attitude that we approach life with can make or break any situation. That's why I tell people every morning, wake up. When you're brushing your teeth, whenever, make the conscious choice to empty your cup, meaning, forget you have a past. And when you approach life without expectations and with that empty cup, everyone and everything you come into contact with has the ability to teach you something. The problem is most people are just so caught up in the doldrums of daily life that they make ruts that are so deep. There's a great quote, and I'm not sure who said it, but the only difference between a rut and a grave is the depth of the hole. So getting people off of that hamster wheel cycle and helping them to realize that life is happening right now. All we are is right now. The past is the past. The future does not exist yet. And sure, of course, we have to think of things in the future. We have to think bills to pay. But that's the biggest difference between us and the more than human world. The more than human world lives completely in the moment, whereas we are always either, ruminating, like for instance, right now, I'll admit, part of me is terrified as I prepare to leave a very well paying full-time job with full benefits to start my own businesses, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm struggling with a little bit of fear around that right
Mm-hmm.
now. And it's it's part of being a human, I suppose. But the more we can learn to kind of mitigate that fear, because what's the saying go? Fear is false expectations appearing real, or something like that.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
prefer the litany against fear from Dune. I shall not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the
Failure is the mind
little death.
killer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I shall face my fear, and then I can't believe I messed it up. I usually know it by heart, but yeah, the litany against fear from the Dune books is a good one
Yeah. I love that
to
one.
to keep in mind.
Another one I'd like to share too is that uh, fear, there's love and fear in the world. Those are the two basic human
Yep,
emotions, and that fear comes from a lack of understanding.
exactly.
Um,
So I will.
yeah.
So there's a great saying is what we don't talk to, we don't know. What we don't know, we
Mm,
fear, and what we fear, we destroy. The further a human's feet are removed from the soils of creation, the less respect they have for living, growing things, and in turn, the less respect they have for themselves.
wow. Beautiful.
Yeah, and that's exactly the unknown. That
Hmm.
fear of change and that fear of the unknown keeps
Hmm.
people shackled. It keeps people in abusive relationships. It keeps
Hmm.
people, from breaking out of the ruts and taking that leap. Like I'm
Hmm.
taking right now.
Right.
Um, I think
Uh, I,
I I think one of my favorite quotes, I think Rob Deerdick, the skateboarder, said is, make your own luck.
yeah.
Make your own luck. If you build it, they will come.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I appreciate that, Tom, because you know, somebody who is just coming to in this world as a fairly newcomer, um, to hear somebody who has a goal of teaching for free,
mhm.
I think that speaks volumes, because a lot of people are doing things to monetize themselves or to, just, I mean, everybody has a right to, but for that to be the goal, I think that already speaks volumes, as in that you actually have some um, skin in the game, for lack of a
Yeah,
better term. Um, but
yeah, and it's
on top of that,
oh,
sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead. I know you cut out for a second.
Okay,
I
yeah,
heard
yeah.
it.
I just wanted to just touch upon. I know. We're running a little short on time. There's so many things I wanted to ask you, but
Like I
as
said, we
somebody
can
who
always.
has yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no worries. But as somebody who has as a deep connection in observing nature and stalking and just
Mhm.
kind of like interacting, how do you view death?
It's not to get all Lion Kingy, but life cannot exist without death, and vice versa. In
Hmm.
order, it's the circle of life. You know, I think all humans, whether they say so or not, have varying levels of fear around dying. But as Marcus Aurelius said, it's not dying that a man should fear, but a man should fear never having lived at all. Uh,
Mm,
and the people that chase those false gods of the flesh, the money, the power, only to make it to the end of their life, they never lived. They never truly lived,
mhm.
or really experienced anything. They,
Wow.
they lived they realized they were lied to. I have
Mhm.
I have a friend who's or whose dad retired at 70, sold his company for 100 something million, and he was retired for 2 weeks, and he went and got a job at Walmart as a greeter
Mm.
because he had spent his whole life working and he never developed any interests or hobbies. And that's why it's unfortunate so many people retire and then they die because they've just focused so much
Mhm.
on accruing things. When in the end, we come into this world naked and we go out naked, and you can't take any of
Yeah.
this stuff with you. So,
No, you can't. And yeah, with that said too, I think that's a perfect transition into these. I'm just thinking about everything that you're sharing here, and you know, a lot of people, a lot of people that I guess in searching your name have highly spoken of you, and then especially your father, who's
mhm.
written so many books. So I just wanted to ask if there's any unspoken lessons that you might have learned from your father or mother that you carry with you as a guide. Um, if you can share that,
uh, Geez,
some values or
countless,
principles. Yeah.
countless lessons. I mean, everything that I am, I owe to my mother and my father, because
Hmm.
of, uh, my mother first harping on my dad to write his first book about his experiences as a kid. And, then that turning into him starting the school in, 1978. Uh, every person I know and love, everything that I am, I owe to that. I owe to those choices that could have been made differently. Because my father's plan was when I was old enough, 4 or 5, he was going to take my mom and I into the middle of either the Canadian Rockies or the Bob Marshall Wilderness, and we were going to homestead.
Wow.
And then he chose not to when he, just before he left, or his teacher left to go back to his people and, shed his physical shell. Um, he said, do me a favor, when your son is born, take him back to our sacred space and give thanks. And, adhering to his mentor's wishes, he took me back there. And what was once a beautiful, pristine patch of wilderness had become an illegal garbage dump. And he had to lay me down on a pile of garbage and perform a ceremony. And it was then that my father realized, I'm tearing up talking about this, but it was then he realized that, by running away to the woods and doing nothing, he was doing just as bad as the people who were destroying. So he has devoted his whole life, to educating as many people as possible. He's sacrificed a lot, as
Mhm.
have I. Um, there are times where I sit down to work and I don't even eat until 6 o'clock at night. Because I'm so focused on trying to build this thing to make sure that future generations have access to nature. And what terrifies me is kids these days and the obsession with technology.
Mhm.
And that's one thing, Trackers Earth, they get so many kids out in the woods between, our location here in Portland and down in the Bay Area, in Seattle, in Denver, uh, we're getting kids out into the woods, and the allure of the technology is hard to overcome. And
Mm,
I teach 99.99% of my teaching as adults, but I've taught kids enough over the last 20 years to watch the change. 20 years ago, you'd get a group of kids in the woods, and every single one of them would be so excited about whatever you were showing them. And nowadays, it's like they want to get home and get on Minecraft or whatever, or they're just being destructive to
mhm,
nature. And so what really scares me is when they come to power and start being getting into government,
mm,
and they don't never had those experiences as a kid playing in the woods. They're going to give less fucks than the people in power now do about nature.
mm, mm.
And eventually, it's going to be like the Matrix, where
Yeah.
we're either going to invent technology that's going to allow us to leave this planet after we've destroyed it, or it's going to be like Ready Player One, where we all spend our time in the metaverse,
Right.
uh, because we've so polluted and destroyed the earth that you can't even go outside without
Mm,
protective gear on.
right.
And like I said, I think, sorry, I'm just distracted by a hummingbird that's drinking from one of the rhododendrons that bloomed.
That's a
But
worthy distraction for sure.
yeah, yeah. My view out my back window is pretty great. Um, but yeah, getting kids outside, getting them excited about nature, because it's. I always like to reference Carl Sagan's speech about the pale blue dot. It's you know we are so our lifespans are so infinitesimal when compared to nature time or cosmic time, and
Mm,
we're capable of causing so much destruction in such a short time. I mean, if you look at all of human history, really, it's only been the last few thousand years that we've gone from being at one with nature to
mm,
literally raping it for short-term
mhm,
gain. Um, Stalking Wolf had a quote, we're a society of people that kills our grandchildren to feed our children.
mhm,
We make such hasty, short-sighted decisions, um, without thinking, by doing this, what effect is this going to have 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 100 years from now?
mm,
I'm reading articles about how they're talking about eliminating mosquitoes by genetically modifying them, uh, to prevent things like malaria. Now, malaria is a horrible sickness; it kills a lot of people. But once again, death is part of nature. And if we get rid of all the mosquitoes, what happens to all the animals and the critters that eat mosquitoes? And then
mhm,
what happens to the animals that rely on that animal to exist? And it's like a cascade effect is going to happen. And
mhm,
eventually, uh, and we're starting to see this now. We're entering an era where we can't exempt ourselves from natural laws anymore.
mhm,
Something you're not hearing about much in the media is the fact that many antibiotics have stopped working because they've been so
mhm,
overprescribed, and they've been given to the animals we eat for food,
mhm,
that doctors are freaking out and preparing for this post antibiotic age. And then this COVID thing, whether you think it was purposefully released or not,
right.
it's a is a small, relatively mild illness when compared to some of the things that are out there, like, the
Mm-hmm.
chronic wasting disease in deer and elk and the ungulates, or, blue tongue disease, which it's not much of a hop, skip, and a jump for those diseases to transition to humans. Chronic
Mm-hmm.
wasting disease is a prion disease. Prions can live in the vacuum of space. They can't be autoclaved.
Wow.
And, it's like the closest way we could literally end up in a zombie apocalypse is,
Yeah.
chronic wasting disease makes the jumps to humans, and just, that prion reprograms us to spread it, by
Mm-hmm.
coming into contact with other people. And, you know, we gotta make a change soon. And, um, I am forever the optimist. I'm preparing as if the earth will go on forever, which it will. If all
Yes, it will.
humans were to magically vanish, the earth would be just fine. That's why I always laugh
Mm-hmm.
when people talk about saving the earth. They're not. They're not talking about saving the earth. I'm talking about saving the earth. They're talking about saving themselves, or
Yeah.
saving the human animal at the cost
Mm-hmm.
of everything else out there.
Mm.
So, we need a radical shift. We need to first heal the damage we've done to each other. We need to end the violence. We need to end the wars. Racism, all of that. To the aware person, and the just so asinine. Some of these things that we continue. What's that saying? Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
Doomed to. Yeah.
uh, it's like, come on now.
Mm-hmm.
It's I recently listened to a podcast. I can't think of the guy's name, but he's a African American musician who has like gotten skinheads and neo Nazis and KKK members to like abandon those organizations just through
Mm-hmm.
conversation.
Right.
And um, there needs to be more of that. There needs to be more of people truly seeing each other for what they are, which is the same member of the same species, no matter what we look like or who we choose to love,
Mm-hmm.
or where our family comes from. We're all the same. And the sooner we can heal those wounds, then we can collectively focus on healing the damage we've done to the earth, and come up with a little bit more of a sustainable way of living and existing on
Mm-hmm.
this planet.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
I'm glad you mentioned all those things, because if you really think about it, and it reminds me of that book again, The Rational Optimist, is he makes this
yeah,
point that the
read
only
that.
differences that make us different are the situations that we were born into, the circumstances, and also
Yep.
the geographical differences in how our bodies just kind of shifted over eons and eons of time
Mm-hmm.
to look different. But that's the only
Yep.
difference between us, and I'm glad you make
That
that point.
is.
Um,
Yep.
and
It's
also, it makes me think of yeah, it makes me think of something that you mentioned in a previous interview about tools, and how we have this newly invented iPhone, but yet there are tools that we've used for millennia that
yep.
still work to this day, and
Yep.
the
They're,
same
they're
thing
at the
goes for our
height of.
bodies.
Yep.
Hmm.
That's one of the two of the things I love about ancestral living skills. One is everything you make is a one of a kind piece of functional art that is unique to you. It's not
Mm.
some sterile thing like, my Beats earbuds that come off the assembly line one right after the other. Uh, Two, these technologies, they're at the height of their technology. They can't be improved upon anymore. Uh, and there's some beauty and simplicity in that whatever skill that I'm teaching that day, has been the same for eons,
Mm-hmm.
whereas, the crap we buy, it's like every year, new iPhone, every year, new model vehicle. And the changes are so minuscule that, and I recently read something about Steve Jobs and the iPhone. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason why he designed the iPhone that the way he did was that you were meant to have one device and that it was just the software that kept getting upgraded.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But he passed on and then it got turned into the, oh, new iPhone every year,
Mm.
and really there's not, other than like a better camera, you know, the, you know, there's there's got to be a way of, you know, making things more durable and long lasting.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, that is antithetical to the way the system works, because the system has to provide work for X amount of people. And one of the ways they've done that is by making people, making cars too complicated to fix. It's like,
Mm.
I have a 2002 Toyota Tacoma, which is, you can pretty much work on it. My partner has like a newish CRV, which you need like computers and stuff to work on.
Mm-hmm.
When I do heavy duty work for trackers, that, I use a John Deere tractor. They have proprietary software that I couldn't, even if I had the know-how, work on that tractor
Right.
myself. If you try to change your own battery in your iPhone, you violate your warranty. So there's all these like right to fix things that are popping up, and that's also huge as well. The whole planned obsolescence thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's also going back to teaching for free. One of the things that's going to help me do that, hopefully, is cryptocurrency.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I just laugh at the irony of that, and the fact that investing in this uh, this decentralized currency, talking about money, in this country, 80% of the currency in circulation has been printed in the last 2 years,
Right.
and there's nothing to back it up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whereas, with certain cryptocurrencies, there's a finite number of them,
Mm-hmm.
and it has the potential to really help a lot of countries that are struggling. Like El Salvador currently just switched over to Bitcoin, and they're getting ready to build this volcano city, to power the tools to mine Bitcoin. And I don't know much about that aspect of it. I do know that it is, does require a lot of power,
Mm-hmm.
and I only choose to invest in ones that you know are the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's so yeah, I just find it funny that I'm using this like digital thing to hopefully one day make it so that I can afford to go around and give away the stuff that's floating around in my head.
Mm.
Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
you know, and I think it's
The
like
duality of man.
yeah, it's like in Star Trek lore. They did away with money when they came up with the replicator, when they could just say, you know, make me this, and it was there. And the
Mm-hmm.
person who made the technology gave it away, and anybody could have anything then. So,
Mm-hmm.
it immediately put everybody on the same level.
Mm-hmm.
And then they focused on things like learning and, going to the stars. And it's, yeah, it's, you know, the future. you know, present is like the palm of our hand. And each finger is a possible or a probable future.
Right.
And, we each personally have this. And then as
Mm-hmm.
a species, we each have this.
Mm.
So, I'm always trying to look, listen, and feel for signs about,
Mm-hmm.
next steps I should take or choices I should make. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you think back to the choices you've made throughout your life and how what at the time seemed like a simple choice drastically altered your life many years
Right.
later, you
Mm-hmm.
know, uh, and it's like a buddy of mine. He recently was in a horrible car accident and almost died because he accidentally he was in a rush. So that's one thing I tell people: quit with the rushing.
Yeah.
Life is too short to hurry. But he was in a rush, and he was going to change the oil on his girlfriend's car, and he got the wrong kind of oil or something, and then he had to go back to the store, and that's when somebody hit him and almost killed him.
Mm.
And uh, think about all the different things like he could these little choices that we make that seem so insignificant at the time. you know Whether leave a place 5 seconds earlier or later. We've all had those experiences,
Right.
where uh, you know I've been in this city and stepped out and almost gotten killed by a bus. And had I taken one more step, I would not be here right now.
Mm-hmm.
uh, so yeah, it's the moral of the story is just, drink in life. Live every day as if it's the only day, because
Mm-hmm.
we are not promised the future.
Mm-hmm.
All we have is right now.
Mm-hmm.
So get the most out of the now. So my father's mentor said, all that I am is now. That,
Mm.
and I encourage people out there to seek the real. You know,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
get hot, get cold, get wet, go climbing through that swamp. Cover yourself with leaves and lay in the forest floor, staring up. For a half a day. Go sit up against a tree for a few hours. It's one
Mm.
of the most powerful exercises. Is the sit spot. Is simply just finding a spot in nature that you can go to as often as you can and just sitting and watching. And
Mm.
you watch the seasons change. You watch the migrations of birds come through, um, and you'll develop. You'll begin to develop a relationship with these beings in these spaces,
Mm.
in places. And lastly, to just be a caretaker no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you leave a place, uh, try to make it so it's better than when you left. Think
Mm.
of it as like leave no trace, but on steroids times 10.
Yeah.
Like we need to, you know, we all need to start adopting that mentality,
Mm.
helping people out, whenever and wherever we can. Talking with somebody who may have a differing viewpoint than you do
Mm-hmm.
about something, and you realize that we're all the same.
Mm-hmm.
We're all the same, and we're all the products of nature and nurture,
Mm-hmm.
um, and a random circumstance.
Yeah.
And we all have the ability right now to make a choice to live our lives differently. And that's honestly, give this one away for free. The most powerful lesson in awareness is choice, is making the choice to be aware.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because like I said, every morning I try to choose to approach my days with that empty cup.
Mm,
uh, you
mm,
know, just as easily I could say fuck it and just put my head down and just be oblivious, you know.
mm,
And I have those days too, where
mm.
I'm just, like I gotta get outside, gotta get out from behind these screens. But uh, the years I spent not doing this work were torture. It led me to, addiction and things like that.
Mm,
And it wasn't until some friends like literally saved my life and plugged
mhm,
me back into nature.
mhm.
It was like Neo in the Matrix. They took me out of the pod of misery and you know uh, brought me back into the real. And
Yeah, yeah,
I'm thankful for that,
yeah.
because I'd probably be dead
Mhm,
if they hadn't have if they hadn't come and kidnapped me. I was like literally living on the street,
mhm,
and
mhm.
like straight up white van style.
Right. White van.
So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Um,
um,
Thank you so much, Tom.
yeah,
I'm very grateful for your friends that did that for you, and I'm pretty sure there are, countless amounts of people that are thankful and going to be thankful for the work and that you're putting into this endeavor of yours and choosing to invest in
mm,
yourself and express
yeah,
yourself truthfully. And yeah, I want to be
yeah, yeah,
respectful of your time. I know you said you had only a couple of hours, but I'm
yeah.
pretty sure this could
Unfortunately,
have gone on for. No, that's fine. I'm
yeah.
very grateful for this. Um,
Well, I
but
think we're at a
before,
good
yeah,
good stopping point, and then
yeah,
once again, I'll I'll if you want to do a part two, I'd be more than happy to. So
I'm very appreciative of that, Tom. Yeah, you go ahead and do your lesson planning, and I hope to do this in person sometime as well.
yeah,
And
I'm
do
gonna
some of your
be
archery classes.
I'm gonna be coming down to the Bay Area at some point to do some adult classes.
Hmm.
Because once I leave my role as director of adult programs, they're essentially, I'm still going to work with trackers. They're just going to
Hmm.
contract my company. And, I'm not going to do as many classes, which is going to give me time. Like, I want to
Hmm.
go on tour, like band style, and just, set up a class here, 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 and just drive my Toyota truck with my bed in the back, and go from place to place, teaching classes. So,
That
yep.
sounds
And,
amazing.
I'm always available. We've put I'm sure you put websites and things in the show notes.
Hmm.
If any of you listeners out there have any questions at all about anything that we talked about today, I am accessible. All you got to do is go to my website. There's a contact me form, and I will help you in any way I can, uh, to deepen your connection with nature, to be a better human, whatever. I love hearing from people. I love, helping people find their path in life.
Mm.
Find their vision in life. But don't confuse a vision with a dream job, because my dream job would be to either be a National Geographic photographer or a fly fishing guide that traveled the world in endless summer style, taking people fishing. But my vision is the work I do. And I love what I do. But living your vision is not an easy thing. You have to pay attention for the little subtle shifts on when you need to alter things a certain way. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Tom. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, brother.
I'm very
Yeah, yeah.
grateful. All right. Hope to
Cool.
do this again soon. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, let me know. Just shoot me an email on when the podcast is going to air, and I'll throw it up on my website. And When do you think it's going to release?
I'm gonna do it as soon as possible, probably
Okay.
the next couple of weeks or so, but
Okay.
it'll definitely
Yeah, let
be
me know
at the front of the
because
line. Hmm.
yeah, because I'm going to be releasing my kind of a blog post in the next couple of weeks about
Okay.
the changes happening with my job and my new schedule and things like
Hmm.
that. So it'd be a
All right.
perfect thing to add to the newsletter.
Cool.
And thank you, brother.
Thank
Keep
you
doing
so
what you're
much, Tom.
doing.
I
Yeah, yeah,
appreciate it. You too. All right. Talk to you
uh,
soon.
yeah. Bless.